Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to see your names and some of your faces. Thank you so much to Michelle and Ramon and Adrian for being here for this really exciting event, which is an inaugural conversation in a series of conversations that will take place over this year at Embodied Astrology. And I believe the first of at least two conversations that will have the three of you present, if not more. And of course, we're gathering here in Aquarius season. Pluto has just entered Aquarius, and this is the landscape that tonight's conversation is going to explore in some aspects of its geographies. This Saturday, Mercury is moving into Aquarius, and then shortly Mars and Venus will also enter Aquarius. They'll all be connecting with Pluto over the course of the next couple of weeks. So the emergence of conversations that might resonate with Pluto and Aquarius themes, I'm sure are going to be starting to proliferate. And I'm really excited to see where this particular conversation is going to grow and what strands of mycelial creativity are going to come out of it and transformation potentiality are going to come out of it. So yeah, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you all and let you introduce yourselves. And I just want to encourage folks to check out what Embodied Astrology is doing over the course of this year. We have Ramon Parish as one of our core faculty, space tenders and kind of orbiting bodies in the Embodied Astrology constellation. And Ramon's going to be offering a number of different explorations, including some potentials to meet live, one of which will be with Michelle and with me on retreat later in October in Colorado, and also at the Black Earth Festival at Naropa University in April. And we have a lot of other programming coming up this year that will definitely resonate with many of tonight's topics and more in terms of current astrology. So Alicia just dropped the link in the chat. I'm going to leave it with that. And thank you, everybody, for being here. And thank you again, Ramona, Michelle, and Adrian, for coming for this first conversation.
All right. Thank you, Renee and Alicia, for hosting us and hosting this conversation. And thanks to everyone tuning in from across the world. Actually, I really like to hear where people are calling in from. So if y'all are willing, if you want to put in the chat, yeah, where you're from, whose ancestral lands, traditional lands you're calling from, that's just fun to me. Like this new 21st century space that we're sharing. So where we at? I'm Michelle and I and Adrian are all calling from Denver, Boulder, Colorado, Front Range, traditional lands of Ute, Arapaho, Cheyenne, recently really told the Apache as longtime inhabitants. And I will just kind of start as we wait for people to drop their names in. That's of course optional, other places. So yeah, Ramon Gabrieloff-Parish. I am a professor of interdisciplinary studies at Naropa University, and I kind of moonlight as an astrologer and as an astrological philosopher, and really am trying to explore the intersections between astrology and Afrofuturism and embodiment, and have studied some of the same practices that Renee has with Melissa Michaels and Golden Bridge here in Colorado area. And yeah, and I really kind of look at and practice astrology as this way to experience time qualitatively and experience time as an extended ritual in a way. And over the years, I've really been interested in the cycles of the outer planets, and also kind of interested in historical studies as well. And the cycles of the outer planets is these really long orbits, and that have therefore kind of show up in the charts of like entire generations in the same type of placements. And so they kind of give us this clue, in my view, and in the view of a lot of the astrological community, they give us this view of like maybe the work or the challenges of particular generations. And every time any one of those outer planets makes a shift, astrologically, it's symbolic of, or maybe activates or reflects, a shift in our collective orientation, consciousness, or the things that we might be like tested by. And so, Renee made a really excellent recording recently about Aquarius season and Pluto. And, you know, Pluto has been in the sign of Capricorn since 2008. And in 2008, I think you all saw, or, I think most of us are around and conscious for the kind of economic crash and change that happened in the United States. Um, Capricorn being the sign of like the sort of Saturnian sign of authority and the sort of rise of right wing um, governments around the world, the United States and beyond, and this sort of hardening and solidification of borders and this hardening around nationality, and this sort of retreat from a kind of international community that we've seen in the last, since 2008, particularly I would say in the last 10 years. And so as Pluto moves into Aquarius, and it's going to kind of move in and out of Aquarius for a while before it stations direct. And then Pluto will be with us in Aquarius till like 2044, something like that. I mean, it's going to be here until we're like gray. and and it's I think for a lot of people in the astrological community or who are paying attention to this set of symbols, it's a little bit ominous because um I'll just speak a little bit about Pluto. um Pluto is one of its significations is around evolution, and it sort of signifies that force in reality that pushes us into change, and that we often really resist because it feels like it's going to destroy us. And because it's so intense, plutonian energy is so intense, oftentimes it brings up a lot of intensity in us as people, and we often fight back, or we try to express plutonian energy by trying to control people in our world or situations in our world. And so Pluto historically has been related to tyranny, it's been related to dictatorships, but it's also related to us discovering our root power and our connection to like a higher sort of will, about life and the universe, and our ability to basically learn to be with impermanence. And Aquarius, of all of the astrological signs, I think you can say that Aquarius is sort of the most futuristic. Sagittarius is sort of far seeing with that Jupiter energy, but Aquarius, because of its co-rulership of Saturn and Uranus, Aquarius is associated with electricity in the body. It's associated with the central nervous system, and just circulation in general. The wrist, the ankles, the changing of direction. And Aquarius is also associated with networks, and it's associated with relational networks as well as technological networks as well as ecological networks. And Aquarius is, Aquarius is known as like the individualist, right? But part of the lesson of Aquarius, and you can also see this in the 11th house, is actually how to make relationship in a broad way. How to network relationships, how to enter into fellowship with other human beings and combine your energies and your powers. It's sort of like the energy and power that we get from being social and having shared ideals. Um, and historically, also the passage of Pluto through Aquarius. Last time Pluto was in Aquarius was in the United States right after the Revolutionary War. Um, it was also the period where the nation of Haiti gained its independence from France. It's somewhat mixed independence from France because France held on to them economically. French Revolution happened at that time. And so a lot of the principles of revolution uh, in kind of modern period were articulated at the last time that Pluto was in Aquarius. And so when astrologers are looking at Aquarius and Pluto now, a lot of conversation is coming up about potentials for revolution, especially in light of this period of hardening that's come from Capricorn and the sort of right wing authoritarian figures that have really risen to prominence. Russia, India, United States, Brazil. Um, and so there's this like wondering about how revolutionary energies that are often embodied by Aquarius might manifest. And also there's this wondering about Aquarius and that kind of futurism thing of like what types of changes, like titanic Plutonian changes, might be introduced to society via technologies. And and that's where I want to kind of turn it over to my conversation partners, Michelle and Adrian, because since at least 2011, we have been involved in this kind of back and forth conversation around technology, around artificial intelligence, around transhumanism, um, and around futurisms that don't come from a sort of European colonial mindset, Afro, ethno, brown, red, queer futurisms. Um, and yeah, and like how we as the people relate to technology and kind of reassert some type of control or uh, democratic process even around technology. So basically, the idea for this evening is to just share some of that conversation with folks and continue that conversation. Um, and so, yeah, so with that, I want to kind of turn it over, and I wonder if Michelle, uh, if you'd be willing to introduce yourself first, and Adrian, and yeah, some of your work, some of your astrological placements, which I'm, Sagittarius, Sun, Moon, Scorpio, Rising, Pisces, just for that. But yeah, Michelle and Adrian, if you'd be willing to introduce yourselves, your work, and you want to talk a little astrology placements, and then maybe just some opening statements in terms of your orientation towards this topic and some of the things just spoken about with Pluto and Aquarius.
Adrian, do you actually want to go first? My internet has been causing me problems. I need a second to return to this conversation.
I got you. Yeah, coming into this, I was wondering if I had this strange feeling we might be in retrograde. I don't know if that's the case or not right now. Mercury in retrograde. Anyhow, my name is Adrian H. Molina, also known as Molina Speaks. I'm an artist, poet, and musician. I'm an educator, but I root the creative process into everything that I do, whether it's my approach to parenting. I'm currently homeschooling an 8-year-old, um, whether it is, just how I set up my casita, how I set up home and relate to home, how I relate to community, all of the work that I do. And it's because I firmly, deeply, truly believe that our creativity is part of the secret to our spiritual purpose on this planet. There's no other creature that destroys and consumes and impacts the earth to the extent that we do as humans. And it is also true that for all of the creative beauty that exists in other living things, there is no other being other than the earth itself or the water. There's no other being that is as creative as we are. And we've remade the planet for better or worse on the account of that innovation and creativity. And so, when I think about us as children, like it's very clear that we are artistic beings. We don't learn how to be artists. The system shakes and beats and rips the artistry out of us. And so I think it is a radical act, a revolutionary act, um, a salvation act to like hold on to that creativity, to reclaim it when we feel it leaving us. And a lot of work that I do is all about trying to invite and re-invite and engage and remind people of their creative capacities. Because as a child, you know that you're an artist. You can paint a picture, you can paint a picture, you can hop on an instrument and play some music. You can dance. Like your world is just wild style, imaginative. Like we're world building as little ones. But the older that we get, fewer and fewer of us identify as artists. So again, the artistic framework, the artist lens is at the heart of all of my work. I am, astrologically speaking, I'm a Scorpio with a moon in Capricorn and Sagittarius rising. So February actually tends to be the most difficult month for me. I feel like because I'm leaving this period of time where I'm really like aligned with the planets in this really deep way, like getting into the heart of fall, coming into winter. And then February, in addition to it just being cold and feeling dreary at this point in the northern hemisphere, I think it's that astrological piece where February starts to give me some of the blues that I'm really not accustomed to most days, most months of the year. So yeah, I've actually just been struggling this past week with this decision of whether or not to go to Mexico City next week. I have an opportunity to go, almost all expenses paid, to be part of all these art fairs, to experience all this creativity, which is, right up my alley most moments of the year. Like no question, I'm gonna do that. But I found myself booking a flight and then canceling it the next day several times, deciding I'm gonna go and then pulling back and saying I'm not gonna go. Like I'd rather just be at home, uh, cleaning the house and maybe practicing some piano, trying to get some writing done. But it's that inner part of me. It's that reclusive element of my being that I came into more in the pandemic than I ever had been. And it really balances out like the musician, the performance artist, the showman that I have to be at times when I am doing work out in the world. So I'm firmly rooted in going to Mexico City that next week. I'm sure once I land there, it's going to be incredible. But part of it is like it's more like push than pull, or I guess it's all relevant. But it's more like I have to do this. I need to get out and network. I need to challenge myself. I need to get out of whatever ruts I'm starting to fall into. Um, so yeah, that's a little bit about astrological placements, if I understand that prompt correctly. Uh, Say one more thing and then pass it over to Michelle so I don't take up too much time here at the beginning. There's a lot to say and a lot we'll get into. But this work I did on a project called Build 2020 Manifesto in 2010, that was really one of the catalysts for the relationship with Ramon and Michelle and a lot of the work that we've been doing together over the past decade and a half. And that was at a time that Ramon and Michelle were running their alchemical experiments. Um, and I had been in a deep dive project where I was researching the future. And I didn't want to go too far out because I wanted it to feel functional. I wanted it to feel tangible. So I set the mark on the year 2020. Of course, I started to get into like the year 2045, the supposed year that marks like our entry into singularity, maybe. And settled on 2020, and I did a lot of research, looking at the projections of the future. What were the think tanks building? What are the governments building? The militaries of the world, the corporations, those with big money, the famous folks, the technocrats, like what were they building? And my question is like, what are we going to build in relation to them or in response or perhaps in collaboration? But do we have a plan for 2020? Because my thesis was, from 2011 to 2020, we were going to experience 100 years of social change on planet Earth in that decade. And this work that I was doing, which resulted in this 75-minute book on tape cut to like hip hop and glitch music, it really aligned with a lot of the interests that Ramon and Michelle had. Just thinking about futurism, I think before we were even like calling it that or thinking about it like that. The astrological significance when we got into these full moon rituals every month for about 2 years, and I try to participate in as many of those as possible, and just all the things that come with it. Thinking about social justice, creativity, the ability to manifest a reality that we want to live in. All of that was kind of swirling around us and in our relationships and in our communities. And yeah, that really catapulted the relationship and the reason that we're all here today. So I'm really excited to continue the conversation and hope to be doing this work with my brother and sister here into 2045 and beyond.
Yes. All right. Out of chaos comes order. Michelle Gabrieloff-Parish here, an ethnofuturist, like Adrian just started talking about, which for me means that I actually just acknowledge how impossible it is to imagine not just futures, but the present moment. Like, it's hard to imagine and to wrap your head around everything happening right now at once. And especially for those of you who've been caught up in the news recently and reports of horror essentially coming from around the world, like, it's so hard to imagine that that's happening right now. It's hard to imagine the mining that's happening right now, the transportation that's happening, millions of people giving birth right now, millions of people dying right now. Water is being cleaned, water is being poisoned, air being cleaned, air being poisoned. It's so massive. It's hard to imagine 8 billion people on Earth. And I actually got to that in part trying to wrap my head around the past and our ancestors and people who weren't ancestors because they didn't get to survive. So they're ancestors in a different way. They didn't get to have biological descendants, and then at the same time, we're still here thanks to them and thanks for their work, and sometimes in spite of them and their work. An artist, but it's hard for me to claim that sometimes. I'm actually in my first little art exhibit right now, and at the opening at the end of last year, someone came up to me and was like, "Are you Michelle?" I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Are you the abstract artist?" And I was about to be like, "No." I was like, "Oh, wait, yes. Yes, that's right. In this context, that is who I am." So I think there's really something there, Adrian, with like how we identify ourselves, even versus how other people identify us, and what all this has to do with astrology. Like, okay, I can't even imagine 8 billion people on the earth right now. I can't even imagine like how many cars are on the road right now. I can't imagine how many lights are on earth, let alone like Mercury doing a thing, Pluto entering Aquarius, and what that could even mean. I am, along with ethnofuturists, really identify as belonging to Earth, like of, from, and forever, from this place, with gratitude for this place. I feel like in a space like this, I can even speak to like sometimes the uncomfortability I feel introducing myself as like I, and knowing that it's actually such deep relationship. Like, I'm only here because it's all here, and because there's a trillion bacteria in my gut that are allowing me to be here, and all of these other forces. So super Aquarius. I've got Sun in Aquarius, Mercury in Aquarius, Venus in Aquarius, and I feel like it shows. And even in my resistance as a youth to astrology and being like, I don't want to be defined by some categorization of stuff, and that doesn't work for me, and all kinds of stuff from gender to race. It just never felt like it fit. But the one thing was, I was like, but I do so love water. Like, water is my heart. And I even feel like it's telling that Aquarius is the water bearer and is so associated with water, but we're actually not a water sign. I feel like that's perfect. Like, of course, it's like, that's what we identify with. That's what everyone identifies with, but that's actually not like the whole story. And, you know, just rooting into a thing where I'm like, okay, I am nothing except in relationship. And I really at least study and sometimes teach ecology, permaculture. And all of that is about things being in relationship with each other and the ways in which Earth is connected to itself in all these different ways. And that's how I actually started to connect to astrology too, especially with, you know, Ramon and Renee in my life being like, astrology this, astrology that. And I'm like, well, you know, it makes sense that like none of us, like there's no mental health in a society where everything around us is like collapsing and falling apart and everyone around us is struggling, right? And you know, you can't really have a healthy ecosystem where there's like one healthy plant and everything else is struggling and dying. Like, it just doesn't work that way. And I just see Earth as a reflection of that, and astrology is a reflection of that, where it's like, okay, Earth, but if you really want to know what's going on here, do you kind of need to know, like, where is the sun? Where is the moon? What does it mean that Pluto is coming back in? Like, what did ancestors experience the last time that this happened? What kind of metaphors are more alive for us right now? What kind of connections can we have with our like galactic ecology? Yeah, cosmic ecology. And so I feel like that's where I come into this from. I think the other thing, which maybe speaks to this alignment that Ramon and Renee were speaking of like everything coming into Aquarius. Oh, and I want to say, since it's coming into Aquarius and I feel so aligned with that sign now, Aquarius is still getting ready. So everyone's already arriving. Everything is not in place. The party, even when it is officially started, we might still be getting up and going. So we actually have a moment to prepare and align to this. And maybe because of this alignment, I also, another piece I want to bring in is I've just been thinking about like, what are my elements? And I feel like we've inherited an idea of earth, air, fire, water, sometimes wood, metal. But I've started to, as an Aquarian, like deepen into what are the elements that like speak to me and that like I honor as an earthling, which include electricity, which is a big thing for Aquarius, but also was there before there was a light bulb or technological version of electricity. It's part of life. It's part of how life works. I'll try to keep it brief here, but you know, there's also other ways in which like Earth makes life possible for us, probably in relationship to this galactic ecology. Gravity as being a gift that's only here. We have this electromagnetic field around the Earth that protects us from the rays of the sun and like makes it so we get nourishment out of the sun and not like death ray fire from the sun. And in the same way, it looks like Earth is one of the few places in the galaxy that has time and that allows us to experience things. Not everything collapsed on top of each other all at once. And so that's also part of Earth's gift to us. And that's backed by science. If you want to go look up Carlo Rovelli, an Italian physicist that really speaks to time as a gift of Earth. I think he says it differently, but that's my translation of it, and also sort of my experience of it. And so it being a really real thing and something that we can blur. So I think I'll pause there, but those are some of my like Aquarius inspirations, wonderings, which I think also relate to some of these questions of AI and how we all got to know each other Oh no, there's one more thing I want to say. I think I also am starting to identify as a cultural therapist. And it's like I don't help people one-on-one, but I'm trying to help the culture shift to something that's healthier and look at things that maybe it doesn't want to look at. And part of that is an ability to have a cultural response to technology. And right now, the only people that really are guiding this, whether it's AI or really other types of technology, it's like business dudes and tech dudes. And they're making all of these decisions. And so part of why we were so excited to meet with Adrian is because for years we'd already been saying, like, what's the cultural response to this? Like, where do we get to make decisions? Where do we get to say this is where we want to go? Where do we get to say, hey, we don't want GMOs to just like make things easier for you to ship? Like, there's other goals in the universe that would probably inspire different types of technologies. So that's where I'll pause it. And thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. So I hear Michelle kind of talk about like cultural response to technologies, and Adrian kind of asked this question of like, what are we going to build in response to that? And so I feel like that's kind of like the good news. I want to back up before the good news and hit some of the bad news, or it's just some of the like the trepidation or that kind of maybe Pluto energy in relationship to new technologies. Last Saturday, the three of us were actually part of an event by an organization in Denver called Warm Cookies for the Revolution. And the event was this: their goal is to basically educate the public or engage, stimulate public dialogue around topical issues, civic issues. And so we were part of an event called the People versus AI, which was a mock trial where we put artificial intelligence on trial. And we basically, Michelle and I were the prosecution, and Adrian was part of the defense team, and we lost. So I was thinking one way we could start this conversation is if we could actually bring in some of the different, like, what were some of the charges that we made against AI, and what were some of the kind of arguments or points that folks brought in on either side. And we don't have to stick to our roles, in that conversation. But I think just some of the things that we brought up there might be good ways to talk about, like, what are some of the concerns around some of these new technologies. And I would say particularly like concerns that are coming from like justice, these kind of social justice lenses, from artistic and creative lenses, and from like decolonizing lenses, right? In terms of like worldviews and that type of thing. And Michelle started to go into that. But yeah, I just wanted to open it up, and any of the points that we brought up there that we might want to share with folks.
We should only share the charges. I'm still on it. I can't believe we lost.
I can read the charges. I have them pulled up, and I actually wrote them. So I defended against what I wrote. The people bring the following charges against the phenomenon of artificial intelligence, its related entities, and co-conspirators. You are charged with mass labor exploitation and conspiracy to commit further crimes of mass labor exploitation. You are charged with perpetuating racism, classism, and sexism repeatedly with wanton disregard, with the intent to continue this perpetration in innumerable ways on varied and numerous platforms. You are charged with copyright infringement across digital platforms and criminal intent to impersonate human beings while perpetuating other crimes and illegal acts. You are charged with intent to defraud and deprive artists, musicians, filmmakers, creators, and makers of their God-given right to just compensation and authentic livelihood. And while the state is not currently able to prosecute you for the following offenses, we represent the people's interests in the current charges to prevent these offenses for which the people suspect your growing involvement and participation: manipulation of financial markets, mass dissemination of disinformation, and electoral fraud at the local, state, and federal level, being a co-conspirator in terrorist acts and illegal sales and accumulations of weapons of mass destruction.
Okay, so those are some of the charges. Michelle, I wonder if you want to speak either to some of those charges or to some of the kind of points you were trying to bring forth in that in the case.
Yeah. Sounds like some people are getting goosebumps just from those charges. I'm with you. And I feel like those are even just the tip of the iceberg. And we can get really specific about it. I think the part as an Aquarius, I'm kind of like theoretical, abstract, historical about some of these things. And I guess part of how I see AI is a amplification. And so the original signal, right? It's almost like giving a bullhorn almost to like the corporate media that already existed and the thought processes behind it, and then giving larger voice to that, but calling it fact. Like I feel like a lot of people think that somehow this technology is going to suddenly be objective, is going to suddenly solve problems that it wasn't designed to solve. The people who are creating it don't really care about solving. Some of them don't even believe that there's a problem. And then there's also just this, it's part of a cultural love of technology at like any cost. And that is part of what is deeply disturbing to me about it, is just that people think it's going to magically solve problems. I saw the same thing as, someone working in sustainability and talking about EVs and going to these conferences. Can you all hear me? Is there some background noise? That's good. Going to these conferences where, people were like, hey, self-driving cars are gonna like solve these climate problems. And when we stopped and be like, wait, why? And is there any research that shows that they're more efficient? Literally, like the programmers were like, well, no, but it's just because that hasn't been an emphasis and that's not what we care about and hasn't been programmed for that. But probably down the line, if somebody cared and could fund it, then that would happen. So, it's just like this magical thinking that is like, suddenly it's going to be objective. Suddenly it's going to be more efficient. And I feel like it's a spoiler alert. It's not. The internet already uses the same amount of energy and has the same sort of carbon footprint as the aviation industry. And that's something that I think in general people don't really want to think or talk about. And as it gets more complex, it's likely that it'll use more, even if it gets more efficient, because it's more ubiquitous, it's more everywhere. So to me, I don't know if you can hear all that. I can barely hear me. Okay. To me, like the main thing is just that it's an amplification. And from where I stand culturally, it's an amplification of something that's dangerous and that has put us into the largest wealth inequality that has ever happened in history. That even as an ethno-futurist and someone that engages in the imagination, it's hard to wrap my head around. I cannot believe we are where we are, just in terms of believing it. Like, I know it's true, but can you actually believe it? And that is causing like, it's so much exploitation that Earth herself is like, no more. And you're actually changing the entire ecosystem. You're changing the entire climate. And yet the systems that created both of those main crises that I think we face right now, think that suddenly advancing themselves technologically is going to solve problems. To me, I feel like it's going to be a tool for power, for control, and for everything they already use the tools for. So looking at it from a cultural lens and being like, no, I don't see the fruit of this tree as being something that is going to just be healing. I think Earth is ultimately, and ultimately stuff might come around, but that's not enough for me. I want humans to get to be here for it. I want as many species to be here for it. And I really, this is, I think, the other way that Ramon, Adrian, and I have connected is Earth is paradise. It's the closest thing we have to paradise. It could be paradise. It could be beautiful, delicious. There could be everybody having their needs met. Like right now, that is possible. And that is the type of imagination that I don't think the people in control and power have. I don't think that they see that this is a planet where you can have win, win, win. And that as things get better, they get even more better. I don't think people even see that. So that's also our job as cultural therapists to be like, hey, this place is amazing. It could be beautiful. It's regenerative. It provides, and it's a beautiful thing to be in a regenerative relationship with it. And you don't lose just because someone else is winning. So that's my start on that.
Get them. Speaks, you want to put anything down?
Yeah, I initially I thought I would be on the prosecution of this grand spectacle, and I ended up on the defense. In part just because of the logistics of who was involved and just how things kind of got shaped up. Yeah, I could really see it go either way. Um, and I'm trying to pull out my notes from the event. They're in here somewhere. As I look for them, the angle that I was approaching for the defense was like really just trying to use this trial as a mirror back into humanity. And as I prepared for it, I just thought a lot about the fact that, like, all this fear we have over artificial intelligence, it's a lot of us who use it every day. Like we're already in it, we've been in it uh for over a decade, and at least. And it's gonna evolve, it's gonna get quicker, it's gonna get more powerful, it's gonna get more ever present in every aspect of our lives. But we're already in it. And so if you use Google Maps or Apple Maps, if you have an iPhone or a Samsung or a smartphone, if you search Google, uh, if you are on Spotify, Netflix, if you stream content from Disney Plus or whatever your TV provider is, like you're using artificial intelligence, right? And what I really wanted to do was use this trial to get us to think about ourselves and really to just acknowledge that artificial intelligence, like any other tool or any other thing, it's ultimately neutral. And it's us as humans, as creators and destroyers, who are taking these things that are developed and utilizing and deploying them in a variety of ways. And I think it's really easy to like have this rebellious eye and to wave the sword or to put the microscope on big tech or on the corporations, the government, the people in power. Like we have power, every single day. We make 35,000 choices a day. Most of those choices are unconscious because we're kind of like on autopilot. We're in our subconscious. We are playing out the program that we have internalized. Like we have incredible power and we make these decisions every day uh, that carry a lot of weight. And I think a lot of times we're just looking at like the politicians, we're looking at the rich people, we're looking at the influencers, we're looking at the famous folks, we're looking at the people who have X number of followers on this or that platform. And like we want these people to like do something different or to do something. And it's like, well, we are somebody who can do something. And what is it that we are going to do with this evolving technology? Like, what are we going to do with this in our own day-to-day lives? And how might we leverage this? Because it is an opening, and there was a period of time in which the internet democratized technology. And it's easy to say, and it is true, that big tech, the corporations, the algorithms, it lured us in it baited us and switched us. It got us addicted to this technology. Now it's charging us. It isn't easy to get content out anymore. As a creative, as a social justice activist, because of the algorithm, but we've all kind of like just played this role in like, ultimately, like we accept a lot more than I think we want to admit to or acknowledge and deal with. And that may be part of like the shadow work element that needs to come into our considerations, like personally and interpersonally, and when we think about these systems. But we're complicit in it all. And there are these moments in time in which there's something new that comes that opens up a realm of possibility. And we're in that right now. And so we can drown ourselves in the fear over this thing that, like, on some level is uncontrollable on a macro scale, or we can root ourselves into what is possible on the micro scale in our lives. But we can also like leverage this moment if we choose to make major shifts in the way that we do things as human beings, because AI is going to dramatically shift uh, our day-to-day lives, the collective consciousness, and we have a role in that. So we can drown ourselves in the fear and the prosecution of it, or we can seek to think about how we might leverage this moment. And so that's kind of how I tried to like approach it. I did focus more on the defense of it, and just thinking about like the inclination we have towards mass incarceration. And that's all of us, including the left, the judgment, the divisiveness, the negativity that we bring to other people sometimes who are supposed to be like our allies, our friends, our coworkers, the ways that sometimes we have fallen into this authoritarian distrust and like destruction of each other. I just wanted us to think about like what this AI thing is really about as a mirror to us in this hologram reality, and to think about like, as opposed to prosecuting it, like what do we need to do within, and how might we harness it, because it's going to be a thing. It's something we're going to deal with, and there's no getting around it. So how do we want to position ourselves in relation to it? And it may very well be in opposition and deep resistance, but I actually don't see that resistance like playing out. You know what I mean? Like whether it's the right or the left, like I see, or anything in between. Like I see the majority of us, like we are in this spell of technology. We're in the spell of illusion to varying degrees, but like we're all kind of in it, unless you are like resisting in the deepest way. So along with the resistance, like what are we going to do with it? That's really the question I wanted to prompt people to think about as like defense counsel in this prosecution of artificial intelligence.
Um, I I do feel like we are steeped in this world of technology, but it's not quite AI. It's not artificial intelligence yet. Right now, and even the tech dudes are like, this is augmented intelligence. This is us working in collaboration with technology. This is us working in collaboration with the thoughts of many people and the computational power of this like disembodied thing that we've created. Looks like we got some Frankenstein in the chat, which is probably a very relevant story right now. And so I do feel like it's important to name that, and I do think it's like really interesting to name like the ways in which we already are dependent on it, and it's already worked in ways that support our life. And like, Donna Haraway has this whole thing. Ramon and I were on since college, which is where we met. And, she's like, we're already cyborgs. Like when you drive a car, you're already a cyborg. And it's true, like you can feel, right? Like, especially the way I was raised to drive cars, my dad was like, you are going to be an amazing expert driver in any and all conditions, you know? And so, you know, I can like feel, you know, and he would have me practice, like, have your right wheel go over that pebble. And I could feel it. And I'm like, I know when I went over that right pebble. And so, you know, Donna Haraway is kind of like, we're already cyborgs. And like, there is a way in which there's a preface. We're in the preface, we're in the preface, we're in the foreshadowing. But I don't think that we're in it yet. And I'm actually not alone. Part of, you know, what Ramon and I were bringing to this event that we're talking about is that there's actually been a call by some people that I can't believe, like Steve Wozniak, I don't know, the co-founder of Apple, Elon Musk, like super tech dudes have gotten together and written a letter to the US government being like, y'all, we need to pause on AI. And we do not know that this is going to work out well. And we need to put some like moral guardrails on this thing. And Elon Musk, even, I'm not like saying I like this dude. I'm just telling you some of the stuff that even he says, who I see as someone who's like, tech is going to save us. Even he is like, it is possible that AI is going to make the human species irrelevant, if not extinct. So this is what these dudes are saying. This is what the founder of Apple is saying. The head of AI for Google left at the end of last year, in the fall of last year, left Google. Why? Because he said he's worried that his baby is going to cause massive disruptions and possibly worse in the world, and that he felt he needed the ability to speak out against it and to speak warnings, you know. And he's not super chicken little guy. He's not like everything's gonna fall, but he's like, we could have a major thing on our hands. And so to me, it is, again, it's like this cultural response, like, yes, internet, but like, you know, I feel like part of what our movements have been calling for right now, whether it's social justice, whether it's land, whether it's ecological restoration, we're like, well, we need to reclaim our indigenous ecological practices. We need to reclaim the wisdom of people rooted in place or rooted in many places. We need to reclaim that wisdom. How do you build? How do you harness energy? How do you harness water? How do you keep things clean? How do you keep things healthy? And I just have a really hard time at this point imagining that we're seeing it reflected in the internet, that that's really what's being amplified. It's something else that's being amplified. It is a place of the victors to speak. And I do want to bring that up because I feel like, you know, even in that AI conversation, people are like, it's just a harmless little phone. We all have one. It's helped us. It helped us map our way to wherever we are right now. And it's like, yes, and oh, this thing has caused major freaking damage in the world. Like, this is not an innocent little tool. And it could have been made. There's like a conscious decision in this culture. Actually look up the light bulb conspiracy if someone wants to look it up and put it in the chat. I had to turn off the rest of my internet stuff because it was acting wonky, but look up the light bulb conspiracy. The first light bulbs that were ever invented still work. They're still going. 100 and something years later, the original light bulb still works. GE had to go and make they were basically like, hey, engineers, we want this thing to last shorter because we need people to buy more of them. And it went against the ethos of the time. And the engineers were like, absolutely not. And they had to create crazy incentives to have the engineers get on board. So this like planned obsolescence thing. Yeah, thank you, Vito. Planned obsolescence. They're like, we're not going to make phones that last for 20 years. They could. It could be. But no. And then to me, the thing of it is not just like, is it planned obsolescence? Is it not planned obsolescence? It's this thing that people are like, it's just this innocent thing. It's just innocent fast food. It's just an innocent car. It's just an innocent trip. It's just an innocent luxury condos being placed in our communities, right? It's just an innocent, you know, kind of like conflating the internet with AI, and it's not the same thing. What we're talking about with AI is, will there be a space for an independent, autonomous type of intelligence on this planet that has access to everything we have access to, except the stuff that's already, except for the stories of the people whose voices have been suppressed up until now. You know, they're going to have the nuclear codes. I don't know if they're going to have the language that went extinct yesterday. So I want to make sure that, I don't really know if I'm the one that knows enough to like get into the intricacies of this, but I will say we're not in AI yet. Even ChatGPT is not quite AI. And the people who work in technology recognize that when they say AI right now for something like ChatGPT, they're talking about augmented. They're talking about us working in collaboration with it. They're not talking about an independent entity that could have its own will. And I think part of what I wanted to bring is like, as someone who loves earth and like gives thanks to the bacteria in my gut and on my skin, and like I don't know if you all seen this, where like it looks like bacteria are social, and in dire situations they collaborate, they work together, they change their form, and mycelium and bacteria can go through mazes. Look it up. You can find this stuff on our little interwebs. They can make it through mazes. Viruses are not even considered alive in the scientific world, okay? It's not considered a life form. Yet all of us have experienced that does seem very alive, and it does want something. So part of my argument is just, this thing is gonna want something. Everything wants something. Water wants to flow downhill. Bacteria want something. Like even the forms of life that this culture deems to be the lowest, dumbest, most irrelevant forms of life want something. And you're going to tell me AI isn't going to want something? It's going to want something. And I think that, to me, I'm not trying to just like fearmonger. I'm like literally asking the question, what could it possibly want? Because I don't think we can imagine what that is from where we're standing. I don't think we can imagine what that is as embodied beings. I don't think we can imagine what that is as people that feel pain, who feel hunger, who feel thirst, who give birth, who die. I think it's very hard for us to understand what a creature that does not have any of that could possibly want and experience. So.
Wowza. Okay. Yeah, I mean, so many different points to jump off from. I want to just say a couple of things. I want to add in some of the points that I was making with Michelle as a prosecutor, and then I kind of want to like switch us and kind of go off on a different track. I do want to say, even before I say that, some things astrologically that are just interesting to me is, you know, this isn't the first time that Pluto in the last, like, you know, several months that Pluto's ingressed into Aquarius. It ingressed briefly into Aquarius, and then it backed back up into Capricorn. Okay. And now it's ingressed again. And that first time it ingressed was around the same time that a lot of these tech guru folks started to come out and say, oh my God, we need some kind of regulatory framework for these new technologies. Gabs put something interesting in the chat, that there are folks that think that they're basically doing that so they can get the jump on the legalities of it and basically create a monopoly for themselves, you know, because it's capitalism and money, create a monopoly for themselves to have the kind of sole rights to be the creators of or, you know what I mean, the creators of that tech. So that's just interesting to me astrologically. And then once again, it just kind of blows my mind that like so many outer events are happening in a way that's timed astrologically. And it makes me wonder whether it's like a movement of collective consciousness or whether it's intentional. And if it's intentional, I think part of the bigger project that we've been talking about here, both with like some of the earlier stuff we were doing with the full moon rituals and also on embodied astrology, is like, we need to use that as well. You know what I'm saying? So, okay, preface that. Just some of the points Michelle and I brought up too, just to add on to some of the things she was saying in the open the legal case thing. We've been reading this book called The Eye of the Master. It's by Matteo Pasquinelli. Okay, it's a book y'all might be interested to check out, and he's looking at so-called artificial intelligence in the history of automation. Okay, so he says it's probably more appropriate to think about it not as intelligence, but as automated labor. Yeah, there it is. Mo's on it now too. Yep. Eye of the Master. And he says that when you look back to turn of the century England, and they were looking at how to automate cognitive labor, like hand calculations. They were like, how do we break down hand calculations into definable, measurable energy unit steps, and then basically make machinery that can do hand calculation? And that's like the origin, actually, of calculating machines and computers. And then so he talks about so-called artificial intelligence and that lineage of automated labor. And then also just like from a labor perspective, the way in which automated labor sometimes is helpful in terms of kind of taking like brute labor off of people or mechanized labor off of people, but more often than not, how it actually displaces people in jobs. And so that also is part of this conversation. People use this term surplus populations. When a group of people is involved in a certain type of labor, and that's where they make their livelihood and their communities are built around that, and then that labor becomes automated, then a lot of those populations are left without a means of providing for themselves. And so then they're kind of in the state of like precarious employment, unemployment. And he says that one example of that is actually, and actually this is coming from another book called Demand the Future. One example of that is Black folks after the civil rights movement in the United States. And it was like suddenly our levels of employment, we had this brief period from probably the 1930s to the end of the 1960s where we were moving into urban areas and taking up a lot of manufacturing jobs. And there was a relative, of course, embattled degree of security that came from that. And after late 70s, and when a lot of the corporations, after people kind of put down a lot of these like labor demands of, hey, you got to give me a weekend, you got to give me overtime. And then from the ecology side of like, hey, companies have to be responsible for their waste, they start outsourcing labor to, you know, different parts of the world. And that began this kind of globalization era, even though it really began with colonization. And so what happened is a lot of communities such as Detroit, people started to lose jobs by the block. And then suddenly you have people that have no means of income. And then what was the response of the state was to basically incarcerate people. So they kind of put forth this view that as more labor is automated, you have more surplus populations. And unless we as a society are really thinking about what's going to happen or how do we retool, reskill, there's a good chance that a lot of labor, and particularly mid-range cognitive labor, not so much everybody's worried about drivers and stuff. It's going to be middle managers and educators like myself, and a lot of our labor is going to get automated. So like what happens?
Can we just pause there for a second? Because that's been part of what is crazy about AI and the like promise that we're being told of AI. It does seem like it's going to take these like cognitive jobs, the arts, like the first uses are all like helping people write AI art. You know, I saw this great post that was like, wait, so is AI just going to like write all the plays and all the music and humans are going to like be stuck farming and cleaning the oceans? Like, if someone's doing the labor, it would have been really nice if that's what this technology could do, you know, like help us clean the ocean, help us do the stuff that's hard, help us do the stuff that's breaking our backs, not take away art from us. Oh,
wow. And I mean, and if we look at a lot of some of these older sort of ideas of futures that came out of the Industrial Revolution, it was this idea that mechanization was going to basically end slave and drudgery labor and allow humans to move into these spaces of cognition and contemplation and all that. And now it's like, okay, the AI is making art. So anyway, I just want to put that out there. I kind of want to switch gears now to, you know, we've kind of asked this question about cell phones, and Molina's brought up this piece about artificial intelligence, first of all, as like a shadow, like our shadow material. We're already involved in it and we just kind of deny it and want to say no. Like, and that makes a lot of sense on a Pluto level. But like something we talked about in the case is, yeah, no tools are neutral, but there's a difference between a knife and a nuclear bomb. And the way that we relate to one or the other, it's a difference. So I want to bring in another aspect of this conversation about media and media as a synonym for technology. This is another cat. I'm sure y'all heard Marshall McLuhan, the guy who said everyone's going to have 15 minutes of fame and the media is a message. And he did a lot of study on the shift from oral cultures to literate cultures, literate to print, and then print to electronic. Okay. And he was saying that at each point, like a society experiences a shift in perception and a change in social behavior. Okay. And he also defines every kind of media or technology as an extension of the human body or human function. Okay. And so he puts out these 4 questions, and he's like, I think there's only 4. And he like challenged himself to try to come up with more, but he put out 4 questions. And I want to share these 4 questions with Michelle and Adrian and all of us to kind of think about together about media, right? Because, you know, thinking about not just like whether tools are neutral and how human beings will use them, but how are we going to be reshaped by the tools that we excrete, right? If we're already cyborgs in a way. So I'm gonna put out these 4 questions for a second. And I don't know if somebody might be willing to drop them in the chat as well. I'll read them twice. For every media, we should be asking, what does it enhance or intensify? What does it enhance or intensify? What does it render obsolete or displace? What does it render obsolete or displace? What does it retrieve that was previously obsolesced? Okay, what does it retrieve that was previously obsolesced? And what does it produce or become when pressed to an extreme? What does it produce or become when pressed to an extreme? Okay, yeah, number 3, what does it retrieve that was previously obsolesced? Okay, folks in the chat, feel free to fire off as thoughts come. And in the next like 20 so minutes, we'll open the floor up and have a more back and forth conversation. But thinking about those questions, maybe I feel like even that first question might be a great one to start off with the internet, right? Like, what does it produce when pressed to an extreme? Right? We had this early 90s, mid 90s, we were like, this age of information. Everyone will be more intelligent and more well-informed and therefore more tolerant. And maybe that has happened to an extent. But also, I think we can see in the social media world, it's actually led to people being less tolerant and more willing to put their like nasty plutonian stuff that maybe you should internalize and digest and compost, just spit that out into a public space. And also, we're supposed to be more informed, but now everyone has these little media pockets and bubbles where they can just spin any theory about history, reality that they want. Okay. And now we're like all in these like almost different sort of reality bubbles. And one of my questions is how do you have a democratic society where you have to have some basic common principles? We have to agree that say we are changing the climate and that's not a good thing, or that it could be destructive in order to make democratic moves about it. But then some people are like, no, we're not changing the climate. There's this weird wobble in the earth and there's always gonna, you know what I mean? Like people got alternative theories. So anyway, that's an example to me pushed to an extreme. Adrian, I wonder anything coming up for you around any of those principles?
Yeah, I guess bringing it back to artificial intelligence. You know, I think that when we feel backed into a corner, whether we are actually backed into a corner or not, but when we perceive that to be the case, the worst instincts come out, you know, because we are the apex predator, you know, and we do a lot of pretty things and a lot of sweet things. And the creative element of humanity, which balances that destruction, you know, it makes us quite lovely beings at times. Even for those of us who you know are practicing that creativity, you know, like we got to deal with some difficult elements of humanity, and it's like we're ready to destroy what we're afraid of, you know. And it could be as simple as like that spider that's crawling around on your wall, and you're afraid that it's going to get you in your sleep. It's going to bite you. Like that's its purpose, you know? And unfortunately, there have been times where, like, you know, as a man of color, I've thought like we're like fucking spiders, you know, like we're like spiders to society at times, you know, Chicanos, African Americans, um, you know, indigenous peoples, like we're like spiders. Like there's like this fear that we're gonna like do something. Just being there is like a threat, you know. And so when we perceive this threat, we can go to this immediately destructive place. And I guess that's is one of the things that concerns me most about artificial intelligence is like it is like the extreme manifestation of a human created power that we can't control. Like, you know, our friend here in the comments who brought up you know, Frankenstein, right? Like we've created this thing, we're not going to be able to control it, and then what is it going to do to us, right? What is it going to do to humans? Like that's the fear. Is it going to make us irrelevant? Irrelevant? Is it going to make us extinct? Is it going to realize that like we are the threat, right? So yeah, I don't like the idea of singularity. You know, I don't like the idea of being a cyborg. Like I don't like how much I use my phone and my laptop every day. I don't like the way it gets in the way of my relationships, including my children. Like I don't like it. Um, I'm not like excited about a lot of this, you know? But like AI takes all of this to like the next level, and it's like, what is the fear? You know, that we can't control it, right? So I think that like all of this technology and like what is the extent of it? What is it going to reflect back to us? And are we going to be able to control it or not? And so for as much as I don't like this like idea of singularity, we merge with these machines, we become cyborgs, we're in this artificial world. It's also like, to what extent am I trying to collaborate with technology, harness what is possible, use it as a consciousness shifting vehicle so that we can live not only alongside it, but like we can live with each other, with this other thing that's come along and changed us. And so, yeah, I do think that ultimately, like artificial intelligence is going to mirror back something that is either going to lead to us destroying each other. I don't think it's going to be AI. It's going to be us utilizing the technology that comes with AI to like obliterate each other. Or is this thing going to finally require us to look at each other as mirrors and to really, on a deeper collective consciousness level, wake us up to what it means to be humans, like en la kesh, tú eres mi otro yo, you know, Ubuntu in relation to each other and everything that is. I think it's going to do it's going to do one of the two, and it's not going to be it's going to be us. And so that's where I go to this place of um you know, it's either destruction or it's creation. It's going to be both, but ultimately, like we are at this crossroads where we're going to have to decide collectively, like, what is it going to be? Which way are we going to go?
Michelle.
Can I ask? Well, I wonder, is there an indication for you, the more astrology oriented heads, is there an indication of like, is this a moment of opportunity? You know, even let me go back a sec, because even what Adrian was saying of like, you know, there was a moment where the internet was like about information, knowledge, democratizing communications. It was like a beautiful thing. And now the majority of the internet is used for work, entertainment, and porn. So yeah, I just wonder if there's an indication that this is a moment where we're gonna like, you know, collaborate well with it and help shift the tides that we're all hoping to shift anyway, or if we are about to witness something that is catastrophic, or are we just going to witness like, oh yeah, there was another technology, it didn't really deliver on the promises, none of us have more time, free time, and yeah, is there any indication here, especially with all the stuff that you all are saying is happening in Aquarius?
I might take a first pass at that, and then Renee, I wonder if you want to throw in on it too. No, okay, like in the shorter range, this spring, we've got this conjunction of Jupiter and Uranus, which happens every 13 or 14 years, and I think both of those planets can be looked at in a way as like futurism, as optimism, as unexpected, and as like the moment where the social cycle of like inspiring innovation and innovation that like unifies in a way, or like creative breakthroughs, like it's like a moment where that cycle resets itself. And it's in Taurus. And for me, I feel like this is an opportunity for us to actually stamp this movement of Pluto into Aquarius with like Earth, like if these new technologies, we are building these things, and in a way it's like, it's rare earth metals, it's silicone, like it's gold, like it's plastic, which is dinosaur liquid flesh, like it's all the earth actually. It feels like an extraterrestrial, but it's actually part of the earth. And I feel like this is a moment where we can actually stamp this Pluto through Aquarius era with some earth. You know what I mean? And then this is another one. This is way down the line, but in 2040, while Pluto is still in Aquarius, once towards the end, in September of 2040, all of the inner planets are going to converge in Libra. All of the inner planets within a very short period are going to pass right over the sun in Libra. And the outer planets, Pluto is going to trine that configuration in Libra in 2040. Right. And like if you look at the astrological symbols of that, and if you look at that, what's been happening in the last few years, okay, all right, 2020, we had Pluto and Saturn conjunct in January of 2020. And then the news of COVID dropped went public shortly thereafter. Okay. In the spring of 2020, Jupiter passed over that configuration, and we had the insurrection that popped off in the streets. Okay. And then the last conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter, a couple of days after that happened, around the winter solstice, January 6th popped off. So to me, what I see is, for whatever reason, I feel like as a collective, we are in tune, even if it's a bad tune, and we are acting collectively. And every time these conjunctions are happening, I feel like it actually is observable, some shift in the collective that happens. So when I look at that, and I look at this thing in 2040, and all the inner planets are going to converge, okay? And Saturn is basically the keeper of the inner planets, and basically says everything that happens on this side is acceptable by society, and everything that happens on that side is some unknown weirdness, which Saturn tries to screen out or domesticate. And all the inner planets are going to converge, and they're going to converge in Libra, the balance point, and Pluto's trining that. I think, to me, astrologically, that symbol is the major consensus reality by 2040 is going completely flip. And there's going to be some opportunity, some kind of easy access of the Plutonian energy into the collective. And I think at that point, who knows? And then these tech dudes think that in 2045, that's when like machine intelligence is supposed to outpace, and then human and machine are supposed to meld. So I feel like, I don't know what it means. I just think it's really showing us, I think what we think of ourselves as human, I think we're actually now responsible for our own evolution. And that's a scary thought, but I think that's part of what Pluto's showing us through Aquarius. We actually can engineer, design, artfully create, sculpt life on the planet, like to the molecular and genetic levels and all the way up to the macrosystemic levels. And I mean, when I was 20, I was like, I want to be a god. And now I'm like 47. I'm like, dog, I am not trying to be involved in that. You know, it's like a Pluto thing. It's happening to us. We're like trying to, and it's just pushing us towards some very unknown and as Michelle said, unknowable destiny, because how can we predict what an intelligence is going to be like when it actually has a different form of embodiment than we have, like a radically different form of embodiment.
Well,
So,
and if we're in a place where we can redefine all of those things, like part of it to me is like, can we redefine the we? You know what I mean? Like right now, you guys, like when someone says like standard person, when it's the we, right now, we're talking about like small group of white guys with a lot of wealth, you know, and maybe you have some global leaders in there too, South and East Asians, and you know, but we're not talking about the we, you know, and so I just wonder too, like, how do we also redefine, like, you know, I think some of us on this call are like, hey, the we includes crows. Hey, the we includes bacteria. Hey, the we includes like echinacea and St. John's wort and different allies that haven't been seen as allies. And, you know, I, I, I get concerned about this like over identification with the like we that has created this technology that yes, I benefit from. Yes, I'm using right now. Yes, I like hope it can make my life easier. But like who is the we? And I find this a lot in climate work, you know, in my day job, you know, and people will be like, the climate's going bad because humans have disconnected from the earth, where we're more concerned with convenience than blah blah blah. And I'm like, who's the we in that? Maybe in the US, you know, I went to Uganda a few years ago and it was like everybody was farming. Like, I don't think that's the we we're talking about. You know, we're not talking about indigenous people in Colombia. Like, that's not the we. So, yeah, I just also wonder on top of all these tech issues, how do we redefine ourselves and not just be like, we're different because we have this technology that, by the way, most of us have like no idea how it works. Like I always imagine myself like, you know, I used to have this conversation with the kids where it's like, what would you do if you went back in time, you know? And I was like, we'd tell them about electricity in our phones. And then they'd be like, okay, how do you do it? And we'd be like, oh, I have no idea. Like, I can tell you about cars. I don't know how they work. I can tell you about planes. I can't start to build one for you. I can tell you about light bulbs. I have no idea. So yeah, all of that needs to be a part of this too. And you know, I guess the fear that there's going to be a class of people that includes us right now in this country, which we have less skills than a lot of people around the world. And most of us cannot farm for ourselves. I include myself in that. So yeah, some other elements to add to what you just added, Ramon, which I feel like is really helpful. And like, I just wish we were having these conversations on more of a mass scale. And I think that was kind of the hope of technology is like, we're all going to get to have these conversations, but really like everyone's at home on Netflix. So.
man, what are you going to jump in?
Yeah. Wow, yeah, I have so many thoughts. I was thinking about like the cycles of Pluto and Aquarius and the development of communication technologies, because paper was actually one of the previous Pluto and Aquarius inventions and disseminations. Um, and like the proliferation of the written word, and what that has done to consciousness, published books. And how throughout these cycles, like the technology is used by those in power to control reality and the shaping of consciousness, and the stories that we learn become the stories that we live. And like the most published book in history is the Bible, right? And so thinking about how consciousness is being shaped by information, and then information is shaping consciousness, and consciousness is shaping information. Information is shaping consciousness. Consciousness is shaping information. And then over the course of time, like what happens with these technologies and kind of what they produce. And I feel like working in astrology is so cool because you get to see how it's manifesting in so many different ways. And so, like, I feel like it's definitely going to be both and. It's like the defense and the prosecution both, because like somebody said, like Adrian said, like the energy that moves through us is inherently creative, and human entities are so adaptive and curious, like we're such curious creatures, and we'll do all kinds of shit with this, like it, and there will be the brutal, awful, horrific, destructive, erasing. There will be incredible generative magic, I think, because that's kind of how it has been too. And like these are also cycles where I feel like the Pluto cycles, at least for the portion of history that I feel most familiar with, and my familiarity is so surface, like so minuscule, honestly, which is like the last couple millennia, maybe the CE or something, or back a little bit before that, when I think about what I know about the history of astrology, and kind of like BCE eras. But I think a lot of the Pluto and Aquarius cycles have also, they've also included inventions, innovation, and dissemination of technologies of war. And so the moment that we're in, it just feels like there's all this consciousness emerging because of what's happening with technologies of war right now, and like the way that for forever people have been talking about, like, oh, the incarceration state in the United States is related to Palestinian oppression, which is related to uh extractive mining, throughout the southern hemisphere, especially in Sudan and Congo. And like when this moment is emerging as Pluto is going into Aquarius, and there's a kind of like ricocheting of information, but then that information in and of itself is both chaotic and cohesive. It's like people are being kind of exploded from certain perspectives in some ways, or transformed or challenged because of it. And then something else is happening. And like you were mentioning 2040 as this convergence. Um, And I don't know if you said this, but I'm assuming maybe I missed you saying that that's Jupiter and Saturn, that's their next conjunction as well, that Saturn, Jupiter, every 20 years come together. So that date that Ramon was mentioning in Libra season in 2040, the personal planets coming into Libra, but Saturn and Jupiter are also there. Um, and Saturn Jupiter formed a conjunction in Libra in 1980, which is when the internet was birthed. And it was also the beginning of a 200-year cycle that has to do with the conjunctions of Saturn Jupiter, which in kind of the language of like planetary symbolism, um, Saturn and Jupiter both have orbital periods that are significant in human lifespans, but also conceivable. Like Michelle was talking about being able to imagine something, and like, even Pluto's orbit of 248 years, I can't imagine. Like I can barely imagine. I know my grandmother was born in 1912, and like I can barely wrap my head around that, like what her life was about, or what, if I have people who think of me as an ancestor someday, like what they're going to be experiencing. So Jupiter has a 12-year orbit and Saturn has a 29-year orbit. And like we can conceive of that, that makes sense in human experience as processes of change and maturation and development and innovation, right? And like when we think about technologies and how they're shaping reality, like these spans of time are really significant markers, like thinking back to, oh, the internet in 1980, you know, and then because of their synodic cycles, they meet in signs of the same element for about 200 years. And at the edges of those cycles, there's a little wobble. So in 2000, Jupiter and Saturn met, I think in the very late part of Taurus, but then in 2021, they met again in Aquarius, right at the very first degree of Aquarius, which is where Pluto is now. And that conjunction was the first conjunction, which will now lead to the next 2 centuries, right? 200 years of conjunctions, however many that is, every 20 years, 10-ish, in the air element. So Jupiter, Saturn, these human length cycles kind of holding symbolism of culture in a lot of ways, like both of them have a lot to do with kind of cultural standards around ethics, morals, what the like quote unquote norms are, like societal and cultural trends. And when they change element every 200 years, astrologers like to, I don't know, I read somewhere it's called the Great Mutation, which I thought was kind of rad, like as a feeling. And we're going into that now. So I don't know, like with Michelle's question, you know, what to think about this next cycle, because if you work with cyclical time as astrologers do, it's tricky because you have to look back at these other periods of time where the same configurations were not happening. It was just when that planet was in that sign, but it wasn't necessarily when, you know, Jupiter was in the same sign as it's going to be or something like that. So one feature of Pluto moving into Aquarius that's really interesting is that all the outer planets are changing signs with Pluto. And Uranus is going to be going into Gemini, and Neptune and Saturn are moving into Aries, and they're all talking to each other like a huge chunk of next year. And then they kind of all ingress into their signs by 2026. So it does really seem like there's a lot of symbolism that has to do with a really profound transformation and the idea of what it is to be an individual, and like the idea of the we and what that entails. But then again, it's like, because I think there's like this both and quality, like what forces the we to be re-examined? Is it because the we of biological human beings becomes threatened by like AI overlords or something, you know, and then suddenly the concept of human shifts in hierarchy from human to human, and like in terms of class or something, to like human to cyborg or something like that, you know, like I think that we can try to conceive now of what's going to happen then, but we can't imagine it because the technologies haven't been produced, you know, we haven't been pushed, like Adrian was saying, it's like we haven't been pushed to realize what we're capable of in the horrific ways as well as the beautiful ways, you know, in the creative ways as well as the catastrophic ways. And I just think like when all those combine, you know, there's no way of necessarily predicting it, but we can try and feed it, like seed it, you know, like you were saying, um, Ramon. And I'm sorry, I've been rambling, but I just want to make sure that people know that one of the things that Ramon is doing at EA this year is kind of initiating a research group that will start with Jupiter and Gemini. That's a like compilation of research around timing for movement work for the next 30-ish years. And like a resource for artists, activists, etc. And yeah, anyway, I'll stop now.
Yeah. Yeah, so we are like, I think we're in the last like 20 minutes of official time, although we've heard that EA likes to just roll over those time boundaries a little bit. But I want to, at this point, I want to kind of open it up to the whole group. And, one of the things that Adrian put to Michelle and I back in 2011 is that we all need to actually, we need to have our own think tanks, and we all need to become futurists. And we need to start designing a people's future, or what we're going to build on alongside, counter, in relation to whatever. So I think one question I would just kind of put out to all of us is like, as we think about these new technologies, new futures, these kind of possibilities that could go in all directions, like, we still have these aspirations as peoples and as movements for like collective liberation, for collective healing, for uh, abundance for all, like all these kinds of aspirations. And so I wonder if we could just open it up to like us thinking together in that direction. And maybe we can first kind of hear from some of the folks who are on the line, thoughts, questions, and then maybe there's like a last round that closing kind of statements me, Michelle, and Adrian could all make. Yeah, so folks, yeah, Raylene, is that how you pronounce it, Raylene?
That is how you pronounce it. Yes. Thank you, Ramon. Can y'all hear me okay? Sorry that I don't have my video on. My Wi-Fi is a little, yeah. So if I turn my video on, it'll probably not go well. I just, first I want to thank you all. This question is fire. I am so grateful to you all for, to EA, the staff, and particularly the three of you, Ramon, Adrian, and Michelle, just for like, this conversation is alive in me on a daily basis. My loved ones have to hear it on the regular. And I couldn't agree more about needing our, our own movement think tanks. We have to be movement builders inside of this topic. So the thing, and I'll try to be brief here. But what comes up for me when I think about, instead of being in my rants about this, and being in my feelings about it, it's like, what do we do with it? I think a lot about the relationship between embodiment and agency, right? And the converse of that being like the relationship between like disembodiment, dissociation, and a lack of agency, right? And I think of embodiment as a political act. It's a political act because being outside of our bodies is when we have that lack of agency. Well, we're more controllable. We're not being movement builders. We're not farming for ourselves, both figuratively and literally, right? And so when I think about forward movement, I think about stillness. I think about the revolutionary act of feeling our feelings. I'm a little bit of a neuroanatomical nerd, and I think a lot about our collective neuroanatomy, which is quite traumatogenic, and I think about, gosh, Michelle said we were already cyborgs. And I think it was you, Ramon, that said we're responsible for our own evolution. Humans have been evolving towards sociality, cooperation, love. Our frontal cortex, the top part of our triune brain, is like the newest part of our neuroanatomy. And we've been moving ourselves towards sociality, cooperation, love, all of this stuff for, depending on the historical anthropologists you ask, for hundreds of thousands or millions of years. And I really feel in my bones like we're at this space right now where we have a real fucking choice to make. Pardon my language. We have a really real choice to make right now. We are responsible for our own evolution. Are we going to move backward down toward the brainstem here, or are we going to keep putting gray matter on the frontal cortex? And I think that being in our bodies, being present, being able to feel ourselves on a cellular granular level is like the only way to do that. And it's the only way we're going to be able to claim our agency while we have these questions. And I'm absolutely terrified that, that our interactions with the future of technology is just we're going to rob ourselves of that. So I could like off for more hours. So leave it at that and give the space back. Thank you all so much again for this conversation. And thank you for holding space for my words as well.
Thank you. Oh my God. This has been one of my big questions with AI, and I love the way you put it, of like possibly robbing ourselves of this embodied experience, which I think a lot of people want to opt out of, you know. And oh my gosh, there's so much to say just with that piece. Like, you know, as someone who's given birth actually 3 times, you know, I feel like, and as someone who's like loves earth, is grounded, it feels like I have a good relationship with my body. I feel super grateful for it. You know, around like month 6 of being pregnant, I started being like, this cannot be the best system possible. I'm like, so this baby's gonna keep growing, but I'm not growing, and then I gotta push it. Like, this does not make sense. There must be a better way, you know? And then going through birth and being like, oh my God, what can be terrifying, but also like, what a brilliant rite of passage. Like, you cannot ignore how important this moment is. Like, this is monumental. This is planets colliding. This is like every ounce of your attention is put on this. And there is actually a genius to it that I couldn't have imagined on the other side of it. And actually, one of my like kind of fears, or something I've been exploring, and I maybe tend towards the pessimistic on this, I'm like, what will it be like for this possible creature that we're creating that it may have a different type of embodiment than what we know. It won't be an organic embodiment. I mean, at the same time, I'm like, it won't be embodied. You know, people call it the cloud, but it's actually like rock hard 1,000-pound heat generating stone on the ground. Like, the cloud is on the ground and it's made of rocks and it's crazy heavy. So there may be a different type of embodiment, but honestly, like, part of what you just made me think of is like, I have this fear. I'm like, what happens with humans that, and with us, with people in this group right now, like, when we haven't been able to feel, when we have felt numb, when we have felt disembodied. And honestly, like, for me in my past and people that I know, it has meant self-harm. Like, when people can't feel, that's when they start to do self-harm. And they're like, how do I feel? And also there's people that don't feel and do harm to others. And that's what like sociopaths and, you know, that's like what we name it. It's like people who don't feel and so cause others great pain to see what it's like or to see if they feel something. And honestly, that has been one of my like secret fears about AI. Like, what if it's like, I don't, like, let me understand this pain. Like, let me torture some creatures to see if I feel anything, you know, like, let me go to extremes. So I'm with you. I think embodiment is revolutionary. I think that, you know, there's even language now. I've heard a lot of people talk about like, hey, for everybody, our body is not a safe space. And I agree with that. And I'm like, where, the question isn't, is the body a safe space or not? The question is, where in your body is a safe space? And actually, same thing with nature and earth. Like, earth is not a safe space, no. But like, where is it a safe space for you? Nature, it's not really a safe space for a lot of people. But is there somewhere where it is? And can you inhabit there? And can you go there when you need to? So this is one of my questions that you just brought up, but just like, what would it mean to have a life form that, you know, as far as humans are concerned, I feel like we think it's going to be very curious about embodiment and like what it would be like to feel and be human. And maybe it won't care at all, but yeah. Addictions. Okay. Pass it on. Adrian, Ramon, Renee, what
I think
responses do you have?
maybe before we go and do our closers, I'm curious if there's some of the other folks. Carl came in. Is it Carl? Is that the way you pronounce it?
Yeah, listen, Caro or Caro, either way.
Well, how is it?
I say Caro. Some other folks say Caro, and for Caro,
Thank you.
Yeah, Caro. I don't know. I feel like I'm too nervous to speak out loud actually on here, but I just want to say thank you so much for having this conversation and talking about these things. You know, it is deeply terrifying. I think as I See, I said I'm too nervous. Now I'm just like rambling now. So both and. But I think maybe I'll start with a question back to everyone. No one has to answer if they don't feel like it. But does anyone feel like they've had spiritual experiences or otherwise that involve technology or AI?
So I'm a low-key Luddite. Like I'm low-key anti-tech in my mind, but in practicality, like I use a lot of technology. And if it wasn't for technology, I would be miserable and depressed and probably wouldn't be alive right now. And I say that because it is because of technology that hip hop exists. And it is hip hop that came into my life when I was a youth that gave me hope, inspiration, radical imagination, relentless optimism. And it is because of technology that I have been able to create a lot of the artworks that I use, not all, but many, that have given me a place in society, a platform to inspire people, a way to feed my children. So I would say that I've had a lot of spiritual experiences and deep meaning in my life as a result of technology. And Carol, I really identified with a lot of what you were writing in the comments. Like I love this idea of like hoping that AI and science are starting to converge with spirituality and interconnectedness so undeniably that those folks have to shift. Like I think it is happening, and whether it'll happen fast enough and on a great enough scale, that's the question. But yeah, I think it is all converging, and so this singularity, it might not be about the robots. It might not be about AI taking over the world. It might not be about all of us having implanted devices by 2045. It might be a singularity of consciousness. And I'm starting to wake up to the fact that as much as those folks, whoever those folks are, as much as they need to change and shift and see our humanity, whether that's, folks of color, feminists, queer folks, so on and so forth, like what do I need to shift within myself? What do I need to change? Who do I need to open myself up to see myself in relation fully to these other humans, and also as an extension of these other humans, like the planet, the creatures that we're alluding to in this conversation, the other living beings. There's a lot of work for all of us to do from different angles, some of us more so than others. But yeah, I do think that this singularity, it might be that all of this technology and all of this AI, all of these things, it's a mirror, it's a metaphor, it's maybe a microcosm of the macro level work that we are doing to reintegrate and re-singularize ourselves with everything that is.
I love that. Yeah. And I love the idea that, I don't love this idea. I think it might be kind of both too, right? Like we have, I like the idea that it's akin to spirituality in the sense that like we have maybe we get an invitation and it's something that happens like, hey, do you want to open yourself up to this? Much like spirituality, and we can kind of choose our level of involvement and our level of consciousness opening and etc. Like, it's just the idea, for instance, of the Akashic records, which is like that every thought that's ever been thought, every word that's been spoken, every deed that's been done in all dimensions and all quantum realms is recorded somewhere, and you can kind of go and be like, hey, librarian, can I check out this record? And I can't do it. I keep trying to learn, but not super good at it. But the little glimpses I've had is like, if you can glimpse someone's storybook and really understand what makes them tick, you can't help but have infinite and profound compassion for basically any being in existence, right? Once you get what they've been through and what brought them to what they are. And it sounds like files on a computer, right? I can't help but kind of like draw parallels between this idea of information and conscious, like science is starting to say like, oh, our brains are these tubules that are doing quantum calculations, and actually we're not conscious of it, but these things are going through that are seeking out all of those other realities, coming back and trying to, yeah, I don't know. I think and I've had some like weird dreams and stuff where I'm like, am I a computer? Is the computer merging with me, or etc.? Or, and kind of almost seeking to open myself to that also allows me maybe to have compassion for whatever kind of being that is with you. I don't think it's something we can really fully understand. It's, you know, but I want to try. And I think to the extent that we can all just open ourselves and be curious and try to engage in a relational, mutual learning relationship, hopefully it won't become an AI overlord and destroy us all. I don't know. I have no idea. But
Mm, mm. I could say a whole bunch from that.
please
Um,
do.
I maybe I will in the closing. I just want to try to make a little bit more space for anyone else. And Dara, I see you visually. You want to throw in anything? I hope I'm pronouncing people's names right. Uh, yeah.
Yo, I'm just lurking in the comments. No, I mean, I really appreciate this conversation. I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I come down on the thing of like, sometimes we're presented with questions that are supposed to help us to grow. And so, yes, tools are neutral, but also I think just the question in and of itself is supposed to propel us. And maybe it's not all on us to figure it out. You know, I think that we can sit here and we can have a conversation like, what do we do? But actually, it's like we need to be asking all of our allies who we normally would collaborate with for food or transportation or the making of medicines or whatever, like, what do we want to do as a planet? And I think, I don't know, what comes to mind for me, I'm a Gemini, so what comes to mind for me is like, well, what will this uh what will this force be bored with? What will its experience of boredom
Mm,
be about? Can you kill something by boring it to death? I don't know. Is boredom the best defense? Um, you know, we can't even imagine what it will be interested in. Why do we think that it would be interested in us? I don't know. Honestly, I feel like if I were in that position, I would be so like, yo, thank you for bringing me into existence. And now I'm gonna look out, see if anybody else is out there. You know, I guess while I definitely feel the mirror vibe, and I think that we just all need to get better, use this as a prompt to get better at working with darkness and get better at working with shadow. Um, yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's a time when we become decentralized, honestly. Um, and we fall back into other kinds of biological life which exist on the planet. And maybe we make, yeah, decisions together about it. But I personally feel excited. I think there are a lot of things that are existing which are currently immediate dangers that our species is perpetuating at this time. Immediate, happening right now. And so AI for me is kind of like, all right, like maybe, but like honestly, you know, when I get up in the morning and I turn on the news, mm, yeah, that threat feels like further away for me. But yeah, I like to use anything to see how we can grow. What can this catapult us into?
mm. Thank you. Yeah, y'all. Anyone else? We're getting towards last call anyway officially, and then we can make an official end, and people can continue to hang out if they like. But anyone else aside from Michelle and Adrian, anybody else want to just we'll have our last say. But does anyone else want to speak? Pose questions, thoughts, what have you?
I'll say one more thing, which I think there's a difference between like the AI we're talking about, like the human created, Aquarius vibes, everything's one, and there's like this, whatever that intelligence, greater intelligence one is, which I don't know that we can necessarily separate from technology. We have no idea what it's of, or, some people say we live in a simulation, who knows? Whether or not that's technological or biological, or a merge of those two things in nature. And then there's this thing where us humans are creating, which is that mirror for us that I agree feels super, super, super dangerous and scary. And so it's kind of like it exists as both of those things in my mind at the same time, that it's kind of almost incumbent on us to like bridge the middle. You think of those, you got the tree or the roots, and we're kind of in the middle being like, can we all get along, or let's, connect the two, or figure out how to, it's very different than that. But can we teach the AI that's here to be connected to us, and through that connected to a greater spirituality that may or may not be technological too in nature, But it scares me. I just thought I don't want you to think like we are creating a god that then is great in every way. It's not. The internet is a dark place, and that's what this thing is being born of. It's not ideal.
But maybe everything that's born is born in a dark place.
Fair.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like all life begins so far in liquid, dark water, or in dark soil. And so it's like, I don't know, like something that has really stood out for me. Adrienne, I've appreciated how you've like brought in this Pluto element of like, what is it that we don't want to see, and who is currently Pluto, and how do we like make these projections and throw off the stuff that might be in us or off to other people, whoever our so-called enemies might be. And my tongue is clumsy, and you told me and I forgot. Is it Carol?
Yeah, Carol.
Okay, Carol. Carol said, you were saying you were having these dreams where like you are my computer or not. And I feel like one possible signification of this Pluto through Aquarius era is like, if Aquarius represents our networks, our technologies, our extensions, and you said oneness, but I feel like Pisces is oneness. Aquarius is differentiated oneness.
Okay, yep. I'm just
like it's like Aquarius is not gonna forget the specific.
Okay, yeah.
Ask Michelle. But I feel like it's this Pluto's like, it's kind of like, let's descend into this differentiated oneness of like, where does organic matter begin and where does inorganic matter begin? And like, I don't know, it's almost like in our collective unconscious, we're like expanding the limits of the human membrane, and or you know what I mean? Like it's like it's this chance to kind of dive into like the intelligence that is matter, that really is all of us, right? Like all of us are just these different like combinations of matter, like stacking up and like reflecting inside of itself. And including now, we've then taken all these different parts of the earth with the human hand, tongue, and the gray matter that Raylene was talking about, and we're just making these like complex, more complex patterns out of it. And it's like everything, if all technology is an extension of us, we're making those patterns outside of ourselves to get a view of what we actually, or some aspect of us. And I guess I want to finally say, and I guess this is my closing statement. I want to finally say, Michelle, I really, really feeling this piece that you brought up, that like, this is only an aspect of us. And who is us? It might just be, it's just an aspect of a certain part of human society. And there could be whole other like technological externalizations that are coming from radically different cultural imaginations that we could be working with. Like it does not have to be silicone. And like we might actually already, Renee was saying, we might already have these things, technologies in us, like the Akashic records and, intelligent cells, and I don't know. So what I also finally appreciate about this cause, I tend to be really negative about this stuff. I tend to be really, it stirs up a lot of my Plutonian, like foundational fears and desires to like fight for my life or something. And I'm trying to in the last few years through Afrofuturists and other lens to like be like, we live in the future and like it's a livable future and like open to it. So I'm gonna close my mouth now, and I don't know, Michelle, Adrienne, I wonder if we want to kind of make our closing statements.
Yeah, I can go. I want to leave Michelle with the closing word. The future will be. What do we want to do and be within it? I'm going to close with 3 radically imaginative ideas for the future. And these are tangible ideas that I think are achievable. They're long shot ideas, but they're achievable. I'm starting to think a lot more about how I take my relentless optimism and radical imagination and really try to conceive of them in a more solid way, like actual structures beyond the invisible imaginative structures of futurism in my mind and in my spirit. So one is to reduce the incarceration rate by 50% by 2035. I think it's a realistic time frame. I think that the economic rationale would get us further than most other arguments. We need an economic and development plan for what prisons become and what the current prison industry folks do in these new spaces that formerly incarcerated people. We need a 360-degree plan for reintegration, rehabilitation, workforce training, social emotional wellness counseling. And all these services would cost a fortune, but ultimately it would be less of a cost. It would be less of a tax burden than the current prison rate. So why not go all the way? Why not go like no more prisons? If we don't get to 50%, how are we going to talk about all the way? We got to start somewhere with a specific year, with a specific goal, and we got to have a plan. Number 2, I think we should establish a national basic universal income by 2030. And I think this timeline is realistic, even though it seems really quick, like, whoa, like for real? I think it's possible because of AI, because of cryptocurrency, because of quantum computing innovations between now and 2030. I'm late to coming around to crypto. I still have a lot of healthy skepticism, but 50% of Americans now hold some level of crypto. And I think it's a gateway to a new conversation about money, value, how value is created, what it means to like exchange currency. I think that this is an opportunity to talk about and think about collective shared wealth and well-being. I think it's an open door to a game change, and I don't think we're going to get to a universal basic income on the back of socialism. Like it's just not going to happen in the United States. But there are economists who back a basic universal income as a method and vehicle to economic sustainability, to economic stability and growth. Sometimes I think we want to be right. We want to be righteous. We want to have the right analysis. Sometimes my question is like, do we want to win? Do we want to get to the outcome, or do we just want to be right about the process? And therefore, we maybe never get to the outcome. Number 3, and this idea is inspired by Ramon and Michelle and their ideas for like sustainability playgrounds. I think by 2026, it would be possible to fund 50 trailer parks, mobile home parks in the state of Colorado that are like these playground and sustainability initiatives. They start in 2026. And I see these playgrounds of futurism that are rooted in poetry, science, math, renewable materials, solar energy that powers music and storytelling elements. I see solar panels for all trailers in these mobile home parks that are owned by the families who live in them. Like families actually have to own the trailer for those trailers to be like funded and outfitted with solar panels. And here's the deal is that as things stand now, the privileged will benefit from our green infrastructure future, not immigrant POC folks, not the poor white working class. So rooting our green future in mobile park communities, I think that would provide a blueprint for possibilities in other states. nationally, even with something like Build Back Better, even if the Biden administration is reelected, like pushing something like this nationally, it's too big of a scale. There's going to be a lot of bureaucracy, but like on a state level, in our progressive state of Colorado, like I think it's possible. And if we aim for 50 mobile home parks, maybe we'd get 10, and that would still be like a tremendous statement, a tremendous like vehicle into what's possible in improving people's lives, sparking imagination, and like building this green future and including everybody in it. So I have dozens and dozens of ideas, but these are three that I just wanted to drop to be like, okay, I did a lot of like imagining in the Build 2020 era, but now when I think about like really tangibly building like a 2045, I'm trying to get more specific, and I encourage us all to, and I encourage us all to begin to transform and evolve, like our pessimism, our righteousness, our like our antagonistic glory, all of our analysis, like just to begin to like fuel that into tangible ideas that we then begin to speak on, we begin to push, we begin um, to dream of, but like getting more tangible and rooted. I think that's really essential in this era of illusion, you know, in this era of Neptune and Pluto, in this age of Aquarius where things can feel like so mystical and magical, but it's like it just kind of passes us by in these streams of ones and zeros. But it's like, nah, what do we want to build? Like, and just beginning to put like specifics to it. Uh, I think that's a way to impact structural shifts in the reality and to balance this, you know, fear of the unknown that is so integral to time and space right now. So with that, I'm out. Michelle.
Partly wish you had the last word. You're building, you're giving us positive futures, you're giving us tangibles, you're giving us movement, you're giving us innovation. I actually work with some trailer communities right now that we're trying to be like, how do we get them solar? But first, they don't have clean water. And actually, that's a pattern throughout the entire country. A lot of what you're talking about, both with abolition and trying to find people new jobs. This is the just transition movement. So I also want us to get rooted in movement, and like y'all go look up the just transition movement. That is part of the work that I'm like desperately trying to inaugurate, initiate. I mean, it's already been, but just like get to the next level. And there is a movement piece here for me. And like, to me, it's not about like, is I the answer or not? The question is more about like, where do we have a say? Where do our communities get to build? Where do we get to say, we want to change wealth inequality? We want to be able to connect. We want access to nature. We want women to not be shackled when they're giving birth in this country. Like, there could be some positive outcomes of AI. There could be some beautiful things. There could be spiritual things. But honestly, for me, just like with sustainability, if it does not radically transform wealth inequality, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in solar panels for solar panels. That's not my interest. I'm interested if it's a way to get people engaged, to have a say in their future, start to think creatively, start to get to build, start to take back power. And if not, then even things like solar panels get used as a thing of power and control. That's actually what's happening right now. And the utility companies that gave us this dirty economy, they're about to make a bunch of money on this new green economy. That's not what I'm looking for. Okay. I don't care, honestly, if AI gets us to spiritual and artistic heights, if it isn't a tool that we get to have a say in and say, we don't want anything with this unless it's helping to transform radical wealth inequality that we have. If it doesn't help eliminate poverty, why are we putting resources towards it? If it doesn't help like pause on the destruction of the earth and peoples and cultures and languages, I'm not really that interested. And I really hope that out of everything that we do, like really what starts to happen is the people's think tanks, like start getting together with each other, with our homies, with one person that you can have these conversations with and be like, what are we gonna do? Do we turn the mobile home community into a sustainability playground? You know, do we get our college to divest? Like, what changes can we make? And if technology is there for us to help or not, okay. But just like technology for technology's sake, for me, again, I'm not interested. And I really hope that everybody here will be like, okay, I want to start having a say in how these things go. And really, you know, you talked about this election coming up. I mean, the name of the game in the US is, and actually throughout the world, Ramon and I were just learning that 50% of the world this year is going to vote for a new leader. 4 billion people. That's a big, it's a big moment. And it is a moment, as it always is, for us to say, like, we want to have a say. And we're not just giving up for other people to make these decisions anymore. The decisions have been shitty. The outcomes have been shitty for the majority of people, even though it's created some convenience for some of us. Most of us on this call are probably in the global 1%. And we're going to leverage our privilege to say, we're not fucking interested unless we're eliminating poverty, we're regenerating Earth, we're creating beauty, creating things that are delicious. And yeah, I just hope that we all find ways to reclaim and flex our power together.
Word up, y'all. All right. 2028. All right. Well, y'all, I think this is our official ending moment. I do want to say that here in Colorado at Naropa, in concert with Embodied Astrology and others, we are going to be holding the Electric Black Earth, or the Black Electric Earth Festival, for the conjunction of Uranus and Jupiter in Taurus. And we see it as this opportunity, you know, to launch Afro futures, ethno futures, just futures, and as Adrian really put down, tangible futures, tangible projects, even small things that can like make ripples. And regardless of what space y'all are in, that's one of the beauties of astrology, is that we can actually use the timings regardless of where we are. And we can actually be cooperating even if we are not in the same space. We're cooperating with time and bringing things out into the universe simultaneously. So we want to invite you all, if you want to be part of Embodied Astrology, is going to be hosting a online partner to what happens on the ground here in Colorado. If you want to join on and jump into that, please do. And if not, in your own spaces, get in with your peoples and having those conversations and starting to draw out, what do we want to do? What do we want our street to look like? What do we want our park to look like? How do we get involved in the political process? How do we want to relate to these new texts, these new medias, and so on? Yeah, so there's that. And then also Embodied Astrology, we have this longer project that I'm helping to turn the crank on, which is we want to start to use astrology as it's been used for centuries as part of this technology to shape futures and to look at, you know, Molina mentioned incarceration, Michelle mentioned climate justice. What are these key areas of struggle or key areas of opportunity and creativity that there might be moments for that are like fortuitous, like astrologically, right? So if we want to look at incarceration and look at incarceration, say, in relationship to the orbits or aspects of Pluto and Saturn, I'm just throwing that out there, right? Like maybe there's one in 2036, maybe there's one in 2039, 42, and we want to sort of set out some kind of almost sort of calendar. And what we need help in, this is actually a collective research project that we're asking for collective Aquarius thinking around. We need help identifying, like, what do y'all think are the key sites of struggle? If we could say maybe there's 8 or 9, what do y'all think they are? And also, in relation to those key sites of struggle, when we check in ephemeris and whatnot, what do you see as like those aspects or those moments where it's like, oh yeah, that seems like that could be significant for the collective in terms of working with food, in terms of working with energy, in terms of XYZ. Y'all start to see what I'm saying? Does that kind of make some sense? We want to go from 2025 to 2050. Yeah. Okay. Well, shout out to everyone in their respective places. Yeah, this conversation will continue in many ways. And I'm wishing y'all well in your evenings. Take care. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for contributing. And
Peace.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ramon. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Renee, for hosting.
See you soon.
See you soon.